April and Chris had been thinking about adopting a child from an orphanage for a long time. The fact was that the couple was married for 7 years already, but unfortunately, they couldn't get pregnant. April and Chris tried to find the reason behind their inability to have a child and underwent one medical examination after another, but they never got the answer. According to the doctors, the spouses had no health problems, which meant that they should have been able to conceive a child. Unfortunately, despite their best efforts, April never got pregnant. Thus, one day, she started that memorable conversation with her husband. "Honey, how would you feel about adopting a child from an orphanage? I actually looked into it, and it turns out that it's not as difficult as it might seem," April suggested, touching her husband's shoulder. "I really like this idea. Who would you prefer to adopt, a boy or a girl?" Chris asked with a smile. "A little girl, probably. When I was a child, I always dreamed of having a sister, but I only had a brother," April responded with doubt in her voice. Having decided not to waste any more time, the couple went to the orphanage the very next morning. Of course, April and Chris had no idea what they would be seeing there. Several little orphans all looked at the visitors with hope in their eyes, as they knew that the couple would choose any one of them. The director of the orphanage showed the couple the kids' profiles, also adding some personal information and providing his own assessment of their character. Each of the kids had their own fate and their own circumstances that led them to life at the orphanage. It was very difficult to choose just one child. The couple could have gladly adopted all of them. Looking through the photos of the orphans yet again, April suddenly noticed a little boy who got to the orphanage a few months ago. The kid wasn't even 3 years old yet, and because he was so little, he couldn't really tell anything coherent about his past. According to the caretakers, little Kevin was brought to the orphanage by a woman who claimed that she found him on the playground. The boy was allegedly standing in the middle of the sandbox and crying. Since there were no adults nearby, the woman decided to help the boy. Sure, the story told by the stranger seemed very odd, but there was no way to either refute or confirm it. Moreover, since Kevin was so little, he still couldn't speak well. After learning his sad story, April decided to adopt this particular boy. "Honey, didn't you always want a girl?" Chris objected. "Yes, but I really like this kid, and I actually have a feeling that I've seen him somewhere before," April drawled thoughtfully. In any case, Chris rarely argued with his beloved wife, and therefore he immediately agreed with her choice. To make sure the parents were making the correct choice, the director of the orphanage suggested that April and Chris take the boy home for a week so they could try living together before making the final decision. During this time, you'll get to know him a little better, and you'll decide whether you are a good match for each other, the director said knowingly. Having taken little Kevin home from the orphanage, April was on cloud 9. From their very first days together, she wanted to surround the child with care and affection, which he didn't get at the orphanage. To that purpose, Chris and April prepared a room for the boy, which they filled with all kinds of toys and books. The couple couldn't hold back their tears as they watched how happy Kevin was playing with the set of plastic soldiers they got him. "Well, isn't he just great? You have to admit, Kevin looks like a little angel," April whispered, hugging her husband. Chris kissed her on the cheek in response and quietly closed the door to Kevin's room so as to not distract the boy from his games. One day, while helping Kevin take a bath, April suddenly saw something that she hadn't noticed before. The woman was very surprised to see a very large mole in the shape of a heart on the boy's palm. Dear Lord, could that be? My school friend Sandy Hall had the same kind of mole. How long has it been there since we last saw each other? 8, 10 years? April thought, having a hard time calming down. The woman immediately told her husband about her discovery, and he was shocked to the core by this news. "Yeah, I remember Sandy well. She was always a straight-A student and was considered the pride of our school. But I think she got married and moved to another city," Chris said doubtfully. Of course, the man was well aware of the fact that the mole on the boy's palm could just be a coincidence and couldn't be treated like a definite confirmation of his kinship with Sandy Hall. Meanwhile, April set out to find her former classmate. She wanted to talk to her, to get rid of any doubt she had. To April's great disappointment, finding Sandy turned out to be a very difficult task. The situation was complicated by the fact that Sandy didn't live at her old address anymore, and therefore, April ended up having to look for her friend in the nearby town. When April finally found her friend, the two were incredibly happy to see each other. "You've changed so much, Sandy. I think you've lost a good 10 pounds, April said. At this moment, her friend's eyes got filled with tears and her lips started trembling treacherously. "What's the matter, Sandy? What happened? Are you sick?" April exclaimed in alarm. "A year ago, my child got kidnapped, and then a month later, my husband left me. I'm pretty sure that's enough of a reason," the woman said, swallowing bitter tears. Now it was April's turn to be surprised. After confronting her friend, she tried to find out the details of her son's abduction. As it turned out, on that fateful day, Sandy took her 1.5-year-old son to the store with her. Leaving the stroller at the entrance for a minute, the woman stepped inside to ask the shop assistant if they had baby food. But when Sandy came back out, the stroller was empty. The unfortunate woman immediately raised the alarm and called the police. Unfortunately, neither the boy nor his kidnappers were ever found. Little Kevin was immediately put on the missing persons list, and his picture was handed out to all patrol officers and hung around the city. A month had passed, but the search for the boy still didn't bring any results. Spending days on end thinking about her son's fate, Sandy fell into a terrible depression, which ended up causing her divorce as her husband decided to leave her for his mistress. Henry Hall had probably started the affair long before the incident, but the mysterious disappearance of his son must have pushed him to make the radical decision. Having heard her friend's devastating story, April couldn't hold back her tears. Did I manage to find Sandy's missing son? What if I'm wrong? What if it really is just a coincidence? I certainly can't rule out this option, April thought, trying to pull herself together. In order to dispel her doubts, the woman furtively took her hairs from Sandy's comb. April knew that only a DNA test could confirm or disprove her suspicions. In order not to give the devastated woman false hope, April didn't tell her anything. After comforting her friend, April returned home and told Chris everything she had learned that day. April was very pleased to get her husband's support in her desire to sort everything out once and for all. The couple had to wait for about 2 weeks for the results of the DNA test to come in. During this time, April and Chris were so nervous that they literally couldn't find a place for themselves. When they finally got the results, the couple couldn't contain their feelings. The fact was that according to the results of the genetic tests, there was a 99% probability that Kevin was the son of Sandy Hall. Fortunately, April and Chris hadn't had the time to go through with the adoption paperwork yet, and therefore, after seeing the results of the DNA test, they had to urgently stop the adoption process. After telling Sandy that she'd found her son, April felt an incredible elation and surge of energy. Watching her friend hug and kiss her son, April found herself thinking that being a mom was the best feeling in the world. Unfortunately, Kevin's kidnappers were never found. Someone said that the boy was kidnapped by a mentally ill criminal, while others speculated that he was kidnapped for ransom. Something must have gone wrong with the kidnappers' plan, and so they were forced to leave the boy at the orphanage. Unfortunately, this mystery remained unsolved forever. Although it didn't actually feel like anyone was too eager to stir up the past, especially after the boy was found. However, April and Chris were back to square one and facing the same dilemma once again. They needed to decide whether to adopt a child from the orphanage or not. Fortunately, this problem resolved itself. And according to April, it was thanks to the intervention of some higher power that it even became possible. It all started with the fact that one of the warm July days, April felt unwell and slightly dizzy. Initially, the woman attributed her symptoms to the consequences of stress and fatigue caused by the search for Kevin's parents. But when the unpleasant symptoms kept recurring, April decided to go see a doctor. The woman was so afraid of being sick that she didn't even realize that it was her 5th week of pregnancy. Upon learning that she was pregnant, April couldn't contain her emotions and burst into tears right in the doctor's office. It was only when she got home that the woman finally came to her senses and told her husband about everything. "This is a real miracle," Chris exclaimed. He picked up his wife and started swirling her around the room. 8 months flew by. As if to reward the couple for everything they had to go through, fate gave April and Chris their long-awaited daughter, Molly. Looking at their little baby growing up quickly, the couple couldn't help but joke around, saying that one day she would make the perfect wife for their godson, Kevin. After the incident with the failed adoption, the boy often came to visit his rescuers and played with Molly, whom he considered to be his sister. Looking at the carefree kids playing together, Chris and April were sure that the two of them would have an amazing future.